Good morning, namaste, Shakti here, back with a final week of lives, talking about my road to Rapture, the route and the journey I've taken to publish my first book, Rapture, a guide to sexual and spiritual awakening for women, which encapsulates my own journey of sexual and spiritual awakening and all that I've learned and now teach in my work as a facilitator of awakening for women. So welcome. It feels good to be back. I'm really looking forward to this share. You know, every morning I sit in bed and kind of journal a little bit to prepare for what I'm going to share and just sort of bring a little bit of focus to it. And as I do that every single time, I feel the excitement to bring my sharing forth. And as you'll probably notice this morning, my energy is still quite low, quite vulnerable. I'm in a really vulnerable space, but I'm going to speak to that in a minute. And it's all connected. It's all super relevant. So today's live, the title is The Not So Sexy, The Not So Sexy Setbacks en route to publication. And a little side note on PSD. What does PSD stand for? It stands for Patriarchy Stress Disorder. And it is the title of this fabulous book by Dr. Valerie Klein, Patriarchy Stress Disorder, The Invisible Inner Barrier to Women's Happiness and Fulfillment. So I might read a quote from that in a minute. But it's also, that book and her work is fabulous. I recommend it to every woman in the world. And yes, this side note is just about trauma and PSD. So for those of you who might be watching who don't know me, by the way, let me just introduce myself really briefly. So I'm Shakti. I'm a teacher of sexual and spiritual awakening for women. I've been doing this work for 18 years. And it's rooted in my own healing journey, absolutely. And I talk very much in my book and my work about my journey from being a sexless single mum to a sacred sexual priestess. But in that journey, the coming to recognize that it's about so much more than healing the wounds of failed marriages, of not having sex. It's about a whole journey of spiritual awakening and personal growth. The book is due out next Saturday, October the 9th, so we're almost there now. And on October the 9th, I'm offering a whole day event online, a book launch event to which you're really welcome to come. We're going to have book readings, we're going to have special guests, and I've got my second special guest confirmed. I'm so excited. She's amazing. Competitions and prizes to win books, to win sessions, and all kinds of amazing stuff. So check that out. I'll put the information below at the end. And what else do I want to say? Oh yes, there is a course that goes along with the book. They are conceived together, although you don't need one. You know, you can have the book without doing the course, but the course, the Rapture course, I'm going to be teaching live for the third round starting on October the 28th. So you are welcome to come. This is for ladies only, a deep dive of sexual and spiritual awakening for you starting October the 28th. I'll also put the information for that below. All right, let's get on to the sharing. So, oh my gosh, what a journey I've been on for the last few days. So I've been doing lives every weekday morning at 9 o'clock, a little bit late today again, but hey, I'm not going to apologize. I'm having to really exert a lot of self-care at the moment. And my last live was on Thursday last week, which was my birthday. And what an explosion of karmic returns that turned out to be. So I missed my live the next day because of various things that were going on. And here I am back to pick up those threads and also talk a little bit in an unexpected way. You know, life throws us curveballs. And I've had to really go with that curveball because it's totally related. It's totally related to this book and to the roots of why I came to write this book. Let me explain. So if you didn't watch it, you don't need to know this, but in my live last Thursday, I spoke, I think the title was something like Sex Magic, the Twin Flame Fantasy, and Kali's Karmic Slap, right? That was the title I was speaking to. And as I was speaking, this was on my birthday, last Thursday, as I was speaking to it, I was feeling, of course, the welling up of the feelings, the emotions associated with what I was talking about, which was a very traumatic experience of being in a relationship that was abusive with a narcissistic person, and how that was all wrapped up in the illusion of being in a relationship with my twin flame. Now, yeah, what do I want to say about that? Which was actually not, well, I would not define it now as a twin flame relationship. I would define it as a codependent entanglement. And what I came to see after that experience was how very much in the New Age world, in the spiritual world, we talk about these, you know, I want to be with my soul complement, I want to be with my divine complement, I want to be with my soulmate, I want to be with my twin flame. And for anyone who's like me, who has a history of abuse, who has a history of codependency, this can very easily become a trap where we project the illusion of romantic relationship and, you know, the romanticized ideal of merger. We can project that onto somebody else. And it's not a twin flame relationship at all. It is a codependent, dysfunctional entanglement. And I was very immersed in that world of the twin flame narrative for a while around that time, because it dovetails so nicely with the tantric philosophy and the tantric understanding of the inner union of Shiva and Shakti, you know, so it can very neatly fit in with that. And, you know, I see others doing that, kind of manipulating that story to fit my own agenda, to fit my own story, to fit my own romantic ideal. And I really see that as, you know, a risk we have to be very careful of. I fell into that trap. I've seen other people fall into that trap. No one's to blame, but it's just about awareness. Anyway, as I was doing that live, you know, again, I didn't fully consciously, of course, recognize everything that was happening at the time. It's easier to see these things in hindsight, but there I was talking about being in this narcissistic abusive relationship and the trauma and re-experiencing some of the traumatic feelings of that as I spoke about it. There I was sitting in the room where my mum had died last year, and her ashes were in the room with me. Her picture, photos of her from her funeral were there in the room with me. And there I was living with my father and experiencing in the dynamic between me and him all the original wounding that I'd experienced as a teenage girl that I spoke about in the very first live. There I was experiencing that dynamic once again, and coming to feel in that dynamic the roots of the wounding that basically catalyzed me onto this path. So everything, all the dots were connecting. So those woundings that I had lived out unconsciously in my early adult years, and then the wounding that really created the seeds in me for the suffering and the pain that created the desire to seek the resolution. So that was how my life path changed at the end of my second marriage, sexless marriage after traumatic childbirth. And it was that kind of shifted me, like, I need to find healing, I need to find resolution, I need to find understanding for what's been going on in my life. 20 years ago that was, and that set me on the path to discover all the things and experiences that then are in this book, right? So just to encapsulate it, what I experienced growing up was living in a household with a bully masculine, put it very simply, a bully masculine, a victim feminine as parents, and me being the mediator and the counselor between them, right? That was my experience, and both of them in different ways having narcissistic tendencies. This is the framework of patriarchy, basically. So just see how in that moment on my birthday, all of these factors were there in place for like this massive karmic conjunction. You know, I know there's stuff going on in the planets. I know there's obviously, I'm going to speak to this now, actually, stuff going on in the collective. And here I was experiencing it all through my body in that moment and feeling the trauma once again rise. So fascinating and painful and difficult and challenging. And what else do I want to say? Well, I think that's enough. And having to navigate caretaking my dad in the midst of all of that, which actually I couldn't do very well. So I retreated and came back here to my own place for the weekend and have been just nurturing and nourishing myself to restore myself. So I want to say a little bit now about trauma, and you know, this wasn't planned, this wasn't part of my plan to talk about, but I think it's really important to speak to what's been going on for me, because I know that, well, A, because I'm committed to complete transparency, right? First of all, because I know that when I share from that place, it touches people and supports their own process and healing. But secondly, because it's so up in the collective at the moment. And, you know, trauma is a big word. And also, I'm aware that it's kind of quite a trendy theme at the moment in the spiritual world. And because of that, I feel almost resistant to talking about it, because I don't want to be part of the trend and just kind of hop on a bandwagon because all the spiritual teachers are talking about trauma. But actually, personally, I'm going through it. I have clients going through it. I have friends going through it. I see that it's a really important theme. So that's why I'm going to address it. And yeah, what do I want to say? There's so much I could say, and I'm going to try and keep it really succinct. So first of all, I worked in a charity for trauma survivors right at that time before my life shifted into what it is now. When I was living in America, just before my first son was born, I was working for a charity for trauma survivors. And interestingly, my boss was the creator of a methodology for working with trauma through the body that was very innovative. And so she was working with people like Bessel van der Kolk, whose books, or whose books I then came on to read much more recently in my own healing journey. At the time, I had no idea that there was any trauma in my body or being, and I compassionately regarded the clients that my boss worked with. She was a psychotherapist and creating this new methodology. I didn't think trauma had anything to do with me. I was just like, oh, those poor people who've had trauma, those poor people who have PTSD, right? Those poor people who were abused. I didn't see that that was anything to do with me at all. And trauma seemed like such a big word. Like trauma was something, either you experience physical trauma in a car crash, you know, a serious injury to your physical body, or it was something really bad, like, you know, you'd been abducted or raped, and that hadn't happened to me. So I couldn't relate trauma to me and to my life. You know, it just seemed very obscure and distant from me. And what I also want to say is that in speaking about trauma, I think probably previously I had this judgment that to identify it and speak about it and identify with it in myself would be self-pitying or wallowing in the negative, you know, those kinds of things, because of the misconception about the law of attractions theory that said, like, if we talk about it, then we're going to like activate it and have more of it and attract more of it, you know. And I don't hold to that at all. Actually, I feel that it's essential to look it in the eye, to address it, to recognize it, and to heal it if we're ever going to have any hope of moving through it and living with it in a more integrated fashion. So it's about healing and empowerment rather than wallowing in self-pity or in negativity. That's how I regard it anyway. And, you know, then in my own journey, I began to realize that actually I've had traumatic experiences, and that actually in going into, say, that abusive relationship, it came from the susceptibility to that, for that, came from a wounded place in me that was originating in a traumatic and ongoing experience of trauma, from both my parents in my teenage years. And I'm not saying this, by the way, to blame anyone. It's just identifying experiences for self-understanding, self-compassion, and self-healing. So both direct experiences with both parents, as well as, and this was a more recent realization, but when I realized it, it makes complete sense. When I read this book, Patriarchy Stress Disorder by Dr. Valerie Klein, what she identifies is basically that we are all traumatized by the very fact of living in a patriarchal system. And I want to be really clear here, because this book is incredibly important and incredibly empowering. And it is not, because I know when I use the word patriarchy and talk about that, some people get triggered and think that by using that word and speaking about it, I am blaming men. I am not. Men and women have both been oppressed and traumatized by the patriarchal system equally, right? It's really important to state that. So this is not about pointing the finger at men at all. However, I want to highlight a couple of things that she says, because I think it's really important, because it's directly related to what we're going through in the world now, right? Because the thing is, we don't know it until we know it. We don't see it until we see it. And all of a sudden, we have this moment of recognition, and then the penny drops, and we begin to see how we've been living with what she calls trauma adaptations, which limit us and keep us small. And we don't see it until we see it. Here's her description of trauma. Trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe in your fullest authentic expression and led to developing trauma adaptations to keep you safe. Hands up, who's had one of those? Me. Multiple. And in fact, I was just living that with my dad, having the direct experience that if I was authentic, he became aggressive and rageful. If I was inauthentic, I felt horrible within myself, right? Trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe in your fullest authentic expression and led to developing trauma adaptations to keep you safe. This includes any event that caused you to dim your light, any situation that made you withdraw from being fully yourself. The circumstance might have come in the form of an insult, a glare, an offhand comment that you're too big for your britches, or unwanted sexual attention. If thinking of it now makes you shrink a little inside, it's probably trauma. Trauma adaptations are protective mechanisms that are created in response to trauma. They're meant to keep us safe, and they do so by keeping us in an invisible inner prison. The prison walls are made of the traumatic experiences, and trauma adaptations act like prison guards. They operate in our minds, bodies, and actions, creating thoughts, physical challenges, and self-sabotaging behaviors that block us from moving forward and experiencing what we truly desire. Okay, so I'm sure everyone can relate to that. So she's a psychotherapist who worked with women And she began to see this pattern in her clients and in herself and wanted to understand it. And then suddenly the light bulb came on for her and she recognized this. And this is specifically in relationship to women, although she's very clear to say that men and women are both equally oppressed. It's just that this is the focus of her work, just as my focus is working with women. If you were ever in an abusive relationship or know someone who was, understand it's not the fault of the person being abused that they stay in them. Prison guards are the reason we stay. Trauma is the reason. Women have been oppressed for millennia. Oppression is traumatic. If trauma is genetically transmitted, this may explain why women without any trauma history they can recall displays trauma symptoms and adaptations. For women living under patriarchy, these survival instructions include: be seen and not heard, don't be too sexy, too loud, too smart, too rich, too visible, too powerful. Powerful women are burned at the stake, or, as my mother used to warn me, no one would want to marry you. Does that ring any bells? Anyone? Women's empowerment has gotten hijacked by the patriarchal overculture and become about giving a woman the opportunity to burn herself out by working harder and doing more while playing by the patriarchal rules. They used to burn us at the stake. Now they just hand us the torches. And one final quote. We were all born into the prison of ancestral and collective trauma designed by the patriarchal ethos. The deepest trauma women experience under patriarchy is that our lives, our bodies and minds are not as valuable as men's, that we're worth less. This core wound of worthlessness sets us up to check off the boxes of external achievement only to have those achievements mask unhappiness and disease. There's a lot more that I could quote, but I'm going to leave it there for now. But that's just to bring it home that all these adaptations that are so ingrained we don't see them until we see them are a part of all of our lives. So there is this collective, there is this personal. And I'm really aware that a lot of people I know, a lot of women especially, are feeling this right now, both in relationship to, oh God, I'm really sorry, her name has gone out of my head and I don't want to be disrespectful. Sorry, I'm having a complete mental blank, but the recent story that's hit the headlines here in the UK of a story of rape, abduction, rape and murder. Sarah Everard, that's her name, bless you. So that's bringing up stuff for a lot of women, but much bigger than that even. No, that's not correct to say. That's not correct to say, sorry. On a large scale, a manifestation of, for me, the same energy of patriarchal abuse and oppression is, of course, what's happening around the current supposed pandemic and how it's been reacted to by global systems and governments. Because if you look at that, and it's so easy to spot once you've been through the experience in a personal way, it is an abusive relationship. There's no two ways about it. It's an abusive relationship. Governments around the world are abusing their citizens. It's an abusive relationship. It's traumatizing. And so this is why so many teachers are talking about trauma, because of course it's activating the trauma all around us. So I know I've gone a little bit off topic, but I think it's all related. My journey to heal the wounds of love, the wounds of growing up in a very patriarchal culture, but also a classic patriarchal family. And maybe in your family the roles were different, but really the energies are the same. It doesn't matter too much. That's what led me to write this book. That's what sent me on my journey of healing and awakening. That was the catalyst for it. And actually, yes, there is one more thing I want to say to that, which is that in the last 5 to 6 years especially, I've spent quite a bit of time interviewing light workers and spiritual teachers and guides, amazing people. And in those heart-to-heart interviews that I conducted, and they're all on my YouTube channel, by the way, if you want to go watch them, there's some amazing, amazing wisdom and sharings. Pretty much every single one of those people, not every single one, but pretty much most of them, went through a traumatic experience, had or grew up in a traumatic household or an abusive household. Every single one, apart from just, I can think of 1 or 2 exceptions, their quest for awakening, their shift onto their life path, the catalyst for their awakening, the catalyst for their serving the world with their purpose was, for most of them, a deep wound or a deep experience of trauma that then took them into a dark night of the soul, out of which their true calling and their awakening was born. So I just want to note that. So the other thing that I see is that sometimes when I talk in terms of wounds and traumas, is that people are I can see them like thinking what I used to think. Well, that's got nothing to do with me. First of all, I'm not traumatized, like this distancing. And also perhaps a fear that if we talk about this stuff, we're kind of going to get drowned in darkness, or a sense that it's weak or bad or wrong, or makes us less than. But from where I'm sitting, it's kind of the opposite, and it can't be escaped anyway. So until we bring it into the light within ourselves, as well as in the collective, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. You're going to be acting from the unconscious, shadowy places, and it's going to limit your potential. It's going to limit you in your life anyway. So, and from what I see, the experience of it is offers a gift of growth, offers a gift of awakening, offers a gift of dropping another layer of inauthentic being, offers a gift of coming closer to the truth of who and what we truly are. It offers that gift. If I think of Ananta Kranti, one of my spiritual guides, teachers, mentors, who I sit in satsang with monthly, if not more frequently, her awakening happened in a Japanese prison. The most oppressive circumstances you could imagine. No freedom, hardly anything to eat, living that awful routine, doing drudgery work. That's where her awakening happened. And I'm not saying this to glorify those situations or to say that we need to put ourselves in that situations. No, but it's just to see that it doesn't mean that we become consumed by darkness. It's like we have to look into the dark to really live in the light in an integrated fashion. Because there are so many teachers out there who will not and do not, and it's very destructive. And so, when I was with my dad, I want to be completely honest, and I was getting activated, right? I felt rage, murderous rage. I felt violent. And I want to acknowledge that because, again, as another guide and mentor that I work with, Fleur Inanna has said recently in one of her blogs, I'll copy it below if I can find it, until we acknowledge our own capacity for violence, there's always going to be violence in the world. And this relates to the Sarah Everard thing, as well as the you know what thing with what's going on in the world, trying not to use the word. It's really hard to kind of censor myself. But you see how even that is part of the abuse. Like, I cannot use the word to describe the thing because I might get censored. That is tyrannical oppression. And that's what it's like when I'm with my dad. If I say what I think and what I feel, he'll get angry and rageful and hateful. Right? Same. All right. So I took us on a tangent, but I just feel that that's really important that that's all come out. You know, but seriously, a lot of us are navigating trauma right now. It's up. We need to find ways to compassionately, wisely, consciously look, feel, navigate, support, and integrate for ourselves as much as the collective. But it's, you know, it's all interconnected. We can't ascend to heaven on earth and the fifth dimension and create this beautiful new earth without looking, feeling, healing, integrating our own darkness. So I was going to talk about the not so sexy, well actually I have been talking about that, the not so sexy setbacks en route to publication. Well, I had a not so sexy setback in my 15 days of Facebook Lives about Rapture, and it's all perfect. Picking up where I left off, after that relationship that had taken me from heaven to hell very quickly in the space of about 8 months, well, I'd left very broken, very dedicated to self-love, very dedicated to inner journey, but I hadn't published, sorry, take that back. I had written the first draft of my book. That I had accomplished. So then, you know, when I kind of had done enough self-healing to be more out in the world again, I sent the manuscript to some publishers, and obviously I used the Writers and Artists Yearbook, and I found all the publishing agents who would be best suited for that kind of work. Not that many agents who specialize in this kind of thing, by the way. And also I courageously sent the manuscript to a few of my closest friends, very like nervous of what they would say about the book. And then there was this really interesting and synchronistic experience that taps into something I'm going to speak to in one of the next lives, and I can't remember which one, but just to show you how there's always been like a cosmic, magical, divine flow within the road to Rapture as much as everything else, right from the very start when my friend Bayari dreamt the title for it, to my friend's boyfriend suggesting what I write about, and that being the catalyst for me starting to write, even though it's changed shape so much since then. And then here's another person who played a role. So I was at a festival, I think it was 2018, the True Fields Festival, which is an amazing festival for survivors of cancer, or those experiencing cancer, or those supporting those with cancer. The True Fields Festival, it's an amazing festival. Sophie True organizes it. So I was there to teach a dance class, and I was just sitting on the grass, chilling in the sun, and Rebecca Sharman, an amazing woman who's also self-published a couple of books. She's an amazing ceremonialist, cacao and ayahuasca shaman. I don't know her that well, but we are Facebook friends, and we kind of have been in each other's worlds for a good long time. She came over to me. I hadn't seen her or spoken to her in years. She came over, sat down next to me and said, "So how's your book going?" And I was like, "How do you know that? How do you know I'm writing a book?" And yeah, so that was very uncanny. I was like, okay, universe, what message have you got for me here? And then she gave me this card reading for the book. If I'm honest, I can't remember what the card reading said right now, but I know that it was spot on and potent and exactly the message I needed to receive. So she came in, and she's going to come back into this story in a few days' time. Again, the way the cosmos weaves, right? So all of this happened. And of course, Rebecca had published her own books, and she had some words of wisdom for me about that. And I think one of the things she said to me at the time was, be ready, because even if you think it's not much, when you put yourself out into the world like that, it is going to bring things up for you. Well, that just happened. And it will attract more reaction from the outside world, even if you don't think it's going to. So just be ready. This is one of the things she said to me then, be ready for that. And I was like, okay, I couldn't really relate to that, because I just sort of thought, well, you know, it's this book. It's not very much. That's what I thought then, you know, it's going to be a little ripple in the world, not a big wave. But I don't want to say that now. I want to make waves. So what happened? I got no responses from all the agents and publishers. Nobody wanted to publish my book. Oh, apart from one that said yes, but then I realized it was a bit of a con. You know, they wanted me to pay some money, and I found some research about them that said it was basically a bit of a con for desperate authors. So I didn't go with that. So no publisher, no agent. And then my friends' feedback, like, you know, because in this book, there were my deepest, darkest secrets, like all my sexual exploits described in lurid detail, all my dark nights of the soul described in detail. And I'd entrusted this material to my friends. Well, what feedback did they give me? It's too sexual. It's too sad. Basically. Oh, and actually another one was, who is it for? Okay. So it's, you know, I took that feedback. I took that reflection, and I was like, okay. And then one more friend, what have you thought how this will impact your children when it's published? Really good question. So I took all of this in, and basically it stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know how to move forward. I felt, oh my God, I've put years into writing this book. It's so much has gone into it. It's been something I've been called to do, and then this is the response I'm getting back. So it's like, okay, the message is stop. I don't know what to do right now, but it was a little bit disheartening. And so I stopped. I stopped trying to publish. I stopped working on it. I gave up for the time being. Of course, that wasn't the end, because it's here now. But I stopped. I shelved the idea, and I put it on the back burner until clarity came about what I should do. So in the next live, I'm going to share how the writing got reactivated, because it did, of course, and how the whole focus of the book absolutely shifted from being like a book full of descriptions of encounters with lovers to something completely different. And sorry if you're disappointed, because that's not what it is now. It's actually, just going to turn the page, a very practical guide now, with practices, with teaching transmissions, with meditations, with homework, you know. So it's become something very, very different. I'm going to speak to that more in the next live. Not quite sure. I'm going to be live tomorrow morning, but I've got to fit the other one in sometime, so I don't know when that's going to be at the moment. So let me just conclude by thanking you for staying with me through today. I know I've kind of gone off. It feels like I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, and yet I feel it's all directly relevant. And actually, interestingly, it's giving me the idea for the next book, which is going to be called Rapture. So we've got Rapture, and I'm going to write Rapture next. So meanwhile, come and join me on Saturday, October the 9th for the book launch event. I would love you to come and join me. Free classes, Shakti yoga, tantric meditation, dancing the goddess, prizes, special guests, book readings. I can't think of anything else. That's all day in a Facebook group, the Rapture book launch group. Request to join. You can come and drop in and out. You don't have to be there all day, obviously, but I'm also doing this to support my intention to get as many people as possible to buy the book on the same day, at the same time, because that's what helps the book become well known on Amazon and possibly become a bestseller. And what else? The course. So the course that I teach, the Rapture online course, it's now a new format. It's deeper, it's longer, 5 months of transformation in your embodiment of yourself as a fully empowered sexual spiritual woman. Starts on October the 28th. All the information is going to go below. Reach out if you've got questions. Reach out if you feel called to join. I would love to hear from you. So thank you for being with me. Lots of love and blessings to you.